So those are some thoughts about Microsoft in 1990. Google, I think, in some ways is essentially Microsoft 2.0. I think that they are applying a lot of the same lessons that Microsoft learned, and in a lot of the same ways. They, as has been commonly reported, have just lavish employee benefits and supports, including on-site chef with 3 meals a day, on-site haircuts, on-site massage, concierge service where they will take your laundry out or your dry cleaning out. They have traveling car washes that will come and wash your car in the parking lot, traveling oil changes that will, or an oil change van that will come out and change your oil so you don't have to go get your oil changed. They have their own buses so that you don't have to ride the bus with the ordinary non-Google employees in that area, but you can take the Google bus and not have to associate with others. And I thought, and then they have some practices that are reminiscent of Microsoft, extremely selective recruiting practices, people lining up to work there. This idea of think time, the idea that they dedicate 10% of the work week to employee-driven creative ideas. And there's been some recent publication on how often that actually gets used, but that's at least the stated intent. And again, not much attention to what we would normally think of as well-defined processes, really more of an emphasis on just cranking out the work. I thought this comment from Eric Schmidt, CEO of Google, was fascinating in light of the OS2 story. He says, the goal is to strip away everything that gets in our employees' way. We provide a standard package of fringe benefits, but on top of that, our first-class dining, gyms, laundry rooms, massage rooms, haircuts, car washes, dry cleaning, commuting buses, just about everything a hardworking employee might want. Let's face it, programmers want to program. They don't want to do their laundry. And I thought that was a pretty interesting comment after that OS2 experience where the team, all they asked for was not to have to do their laundry. Okay, so I think, other than that, from what I've seen, I really do think Google today is a lot like Microsoft was in the 90s. And, it'll be interesting to see how that evolves over time. I think there are things you can do when you're 5,000 or 10,000 people that by the time you get to be 100,000 people are a lot harder to pull off, and so we'll kind of just have to see how that plays out. So, little interlude here. What factors really matter? One of the criticisms that was levied against Microsoft in the 90s and against Google today is this lack of process and what a bad idea that is. According to the Kokomo 2 estimation model, which is probably the best known publicly published estimation model, these are the 22 factors that affect software project outcomes the most. And it's interesting, and this is at 5 million lines of code. Some of the factors, the ones shown in the darker red bars, vary depending on how large the project is. And as you can see, the most significant factors are things like product complexity, analyst capability, which refers to how good the requirements workers are on the project, process maturity, that's the thing that people like me tend to write about, architecture and risk resolution, which is what it sounds like. Do you do a good job of trying to identify and attack risks on the project, programmer capability, and so on. Well, that's at 5 million lines of code. That's a pretty good-sized project for most organizations. For many organizations, that would be larger than any project they would ever take on. At a smaller project size, those red bars, let's say 100,000 lines of code, those red bars, or the factors indicated by the red bars, are way less important. And now what factors are at the top? Product complexity. Well, you don't have a lot of control over that. Usually that's handed to you by the industry you're in. Analyst capability. How good are the people getting their requirements? Big factor. Number 2, overall. Programmer capability. How good are the programmers on your project? Another big factor. And number 3, overall. Time constraint refers to the execution time constraint. If you work on a real-time system with hard timing constraints, again, that just is kind of handed to you by the nature of the software you work on. You typically don't have a lot of control over that. Personnel continuity. That is, what is your level of turnover? So that's factor number 5. Low turnover is the 5th highest influence on productivity overall. And then multi-site development. Are you co-located at one site? Are you spread across multiple buildings on the same campus? Are you spread across multiple campuses in the same metropolitan area? Are you spread across multiple time zones? the more co-located people are, the more productive they are, according to the Kokomo model. So you start looking at the factors that Microsoft in the 90s was optimizing for, and that Google in the 2000s is optimizing for, and you throw it against this list. You say, what are they focusing on? Well, they're focusing on product and program managers that are really intimate with their customers. That's optimizing for the second most important factor. They're hiring incredibly selectively. That's optimizing for the third most important factor. They're providing lavish benefits. Okay, that's optimizing for staff recruiting as well as for retention. So minimizing turnover. That's optimizing for the fifth most important factor. And they're providing facilities where, for the most part, teams are co-located. At least in the 90s at Microsoft, that was true. I believe that's true today at Google. So you start saying, well, why aren't they optimizing for process? The answer is, well, process isn't even in the top half of significant factors at this small.
The documentation one, some processes make that one pop out.
The
Documentation match the life cycle needs is the burdensome processes make that get in the way. And it's not the two examples you brought up, but the opposite examples can make that fall apart.
Yeah, in the Kokomo model, that basically solely, it doesn't refer to how good the documentation is.
It says match the life cycle needs.
That is what it says, but that's not how it's defined, despite the fact that that's the label. The way that it's defined when you look at the details really is solely the extent of documentation, and there's no notion of getting credit for good documentation in Kokomo. It's solely a matter of you get penalized for the extent of documentation. If you have extensive and fantastic documentation in Kokomo, you still get penalized. If you have minimal and crummy documentation and you should have more than you do, you actually still get a benefit from that in Kokomo. So the label's a little misleading. But even there, you know, the fact that it is a factor, it's still, where is that one?
4, 6, 8.
About 8 down.
About 8 or 9.
It's about 8 down. Yeah. So it's in the top half, but you know, still not one of the most significant factors. So the thing that's interesting is, okay, fine. So now I'm saying, all right, this is a pretty good strategic decision by Google maybe today or Microsoft maybe 20 years ago. But the fact of the matter is, organizations often have trouble with this transition. That is, okay, fine, in 1990 this works for Microsoft, but in 2005 or 2010, how is that going to work? It's not going to work nearly as well, because now we're not developing programs that are 100,000 lines of code. We are working on programs that are 5 million or 10 million lines of code. And if we're still trying to operate like we were 15 years ago, it's not going to work out as well, because now we actually do have to care about things like process maturity, architecture and risk resolution, and so on. And so this is one of the things where we often see when we consult with companies is they carry these sort of outdated expectations about what it takes to be successful, and as they grow, they don't adjust their expectations about what's needed to be successful at a larger size.